You are listening to the very first black woman-owned radio station in Oklahoma, the Greenwood Beat, WFPG.
Good evening, family. This is your brother, student minister Alvin Muhammad here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I want to invite you out to this week's edition of the Trumpet on Greenwood. Thank you for tuning in. I pray that God blesses us each and every listener with a greater understanding of our purpose here in the city and the state of Oklahoma and in America in general. For as a people, we need to come together and learn, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, to do something for ourselves, particularly as we are encountering this increasing hostile environment as it relates to teaching our people the truth. Let me begin by saying that I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and I further bear witness that Minister Louis Farrakhan is indeed the divine reminder in our midst. I greet you, listening audience, in the Arabic words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. This week's subject matter is called When Satan Cast Out Satan. When Satan cast out Satan, the declining and failing state of public education in the state of Oklahoma and in truth, America. You know, in Matthew 12 and 26, it reads, when Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall his kingdom stand? With the ongoing fight among educational leaders in Oklahoma, we can alter this scripture to read, when Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How can his educational system stand? Recently, State Superintendent for Public Instruction, Ryan Walters, is calling for the removal of Tulsa Public School Superintendent Dr. Deborah Gist, because he says that she is failing the district and its students. What we must understand as a community is that this fight has nothing to do with black students, because both Ryan and Gist represent a system that intends to keep black students in a position of inferiority and white students in a position of superiority. We must also grow to understand that this present educational system has never served the needs of black students. Never. And we must abolish and replace it in order that black students may receive equal education according to the Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974. Almost 50 years ago, this law was created to prohibit discrimination against black students, but in 2023, black students still suffer the same inequalities in education that this act or law was established to prevent. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan states in study guide number 21, titled The Educational Challenge, a New Educational Paradigm for the 21st Century, that good education was never designed for the masses, whether white, black, or Asian. Good education was given to an elite, and that elite was to rule the masses that have less or an inferior education. State Superintendent Ryan Walters gets 2 fat checks from the state at taxpayers' expense. He gets close to $125,000 a year functioning as superintendent, and an additional $40,000 a year as Secretary of Education. Locally, Tulsa Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Gist receives a whopping $255,000 a year, and that's her base pay. And on top of that, her staff, which includes the deputy superintendent, the chief talent officer, the chief learning officer, the general counsel, the chief finance officer, the chief information officer, and the chief strategy officer, they all receive ridiculous amounts of annual pay. So we want to look at not only what Miss Gist is receiving, but let's look at her staff. The deputy superintendent makes almost $250,000 a year. The chief talent officer makes between $145,000 to $255,000 a year. The chief learning officer makes almost $195,000 a year. The general counsel makes a cool $180,000 a year. The chief finance officer makes $153,000 a year. The chief information officer makes $147,000 a year. And the chief strategy officer brings in around $147,000 a year. These individuals represent the elite in our present educational system here in Oklahoma. Yet black students' talents get overlooked unless it's in sports. Black learning is at the bottom rung of education. Black students are the last to receive information that will help advance them. Black students do not receive the finances that will help make them equal to white students, and there is no strategy in place to ensure black students and white students have the same educational opportunities. What we must come to understand, brothers and sisters, is that these staff members who operate under Superintendent Gist serve to ensure that the system of white superiority and black inferiority remain intact, to keep the elite in rule over the masses of our people. This is done according to the ideology of former President Woodrow Wilson, who first served as president of the prestigious Princeton University. President Woodrow Wilson said, "We want a class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very larger class of necessity, or in other words, slaves, to forego or do without the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult tasks." This is the mindset at the root of what is referred to as white privilege. In the group of individuals, a smaller group of individuals who believe that the masses should serve them and work to keep the masses uneducated and in the position of servitude. And unfortunately, at the bottom of that rung is black people in America. In contrast to this elite status in education, we have the Tulsa School Board, who receive only $25 per meeting, not to exceed $100 per month. $25 per meeting, not to exceed $100 per month. God forbid we have 5 weeks, 5 weeks in a month. Our school board would not be getting paid in order to serve our community. The Tulsa School Board members are volunteers who are responsible for establishing policies under which the district operates, as well as hiring and supervising a superintendent that makes almost $500,000 a year. What power does volunteers who make $25 a meeting, not to exceed $100 per year, have over an individual who makes or is making almost $500,000 a year? This is why I believe State Superintendent of Public Education, Mr. Ryan, is looking at how the Houston public school system removed their superintendent, because the school board has no real power to do so, especially when they renew her contract, as has been done. And how are black students measuring up in this present educational system in Oklahoma and around the country? Every year, we run to the front of the line to receive school supplies for our children, but our children remain at the back of the line in education. So what are our children being supplied with? A book bag, some pencils, a couple of notepads? What good are those notepads when our children remain at the back of the line in education and have remained in the back of the line for years. Yet we run to the front of the line to get supplies that do not supply our children with the necessary education to help them advance and be equal to our white counterparts or their white counterpart students. Nationwide, black students have the lowest high school graduation rates of 81.1%. And in Oklahoma, Asians have an 87% graduation rate. Whites have a 86.3% graduation rate. Native Americans have an 84.8% graduation rate. Hispanic children have a 81.8% graduation rate. And black students bring up the rear with an 80.1% graduation rate. According to the National Assessment Progress Report, the black-white gap in mathematics widens as students get older from 4th to 8th grade levels, but the gap remains the same in reading during the same grade levels. In mathematics, there is a 26-point difference at the 4th grade level and a 31-point difference by the 8th grade level between black and white students. In reading, there's a 27-point difference at 4th grade level and a 26-point difference by 8th grade level between black and white students. According to the 2019 report by the Oklahoman newspaper, minority children had a lower test score than whites, even when the only difference was color, even when there was no economic or disability involved. We still ended up at the bottom rung of all educational indicators. Even at our beloved historically black high school, Booker T. Washington, that became a magnet school in 1970, while receiving an overall grade of an A in 2019 in the state report card, only 16% of white students failed to meet academic targets, compared to 39% of the black students who failed to meet educational targets. Former state superintendent of public instruction, Joy Hoffmeister, stated, blacks are not economically disadvantaged. They are not battling disability or New English. So what is the problem? She answers, the problem is the persistence of racial economic gaps. 49 years after the passage of the Equal Educational Opportunities Act, racial economic gaps keeps black students on the bottom rung of all educational indicators. Minister Farrakhan goes on to say in the study guide, The Educational Challenge, a New Educational Paradigm for the 21st Century, that we are having all these problems now in education because the idea at the root of it, white supremacy, is a finite idea that which has to end in order for something new and better to come in. White dominance over black is the rule of the day in Oklahoma in its educational system, as indicated in a 2022 report by the Oklahoman newspaper, which addresses what is referred to as a positive impact. A positive impact. A positive impact occurs, according to the article, when the school staff reflects the diversity of the students. But in Oklahoma, the article points out that less than half of Oklahoma public school children are white. But 84% of state teachers are white and 80% of school superintendents are white. How can black students have a positive impact in such a racist and biased system? How can our children be encouraged to do better when they are constantly put in a situation where they don't see themselves? We don't see ourselves in education. We don't see ourselves in positions of authority in education. The teachers are majority white, yet minorities outnumber white students in public education. But again, we don't see ourselves. How can black students have a positive impact in such a racist and biased system? They tell us this racial gap is due to black teacher shortage. But how can we understand, or we must understand, that this is by design? How can we be qualified to properly teach our students when we have not been properly educated in mathematics and reading for decades due to this persistent racial economic gap that this mindset of white superiority and elitism produces? And finally, we have the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, conducted by a sector of the Department of Education, which revealed that 84% of all black students lack proficiency in mathematics, and 85% of all black students lack proficiency in reading skills. So what are we fighting for? Why are black people concerning themselves with if Superintendent Walters wants to have Superintendent Gist fired? This is not a black issue. This is Satan casting out Satan. This is the scripture being manifested. The wisest thing for us to do while the scriptures are being manifested is to stay out of the way. The educational system that promotes white superiority and black inferiority must be done away with. This is why we have the issue of critical race theory before us today, because the elite of this system, the hidden races of this educational system, want to uphold their superior position over the inferior masses within this educational system. As I informed you last week, Tulsa is now a majority minority city. So the fight to keep whites in the position of power is intensifying, and white people will go to war with each other on who is best capable of keeping this system of white superiority and black inferiority in place. So we got to get out of the way, brothers and sisters. It's no need for us to get all upset over Mr. Walters trying to cast out Miss Gist or vice versa. Neither one of them are working to improve the condition of black children, other than maybe increasing them a few points each year. But neither one are working to equalize black students with that of white students. So why are we getting upset over this conflict? Move out the way and let Satan go to war against himself. Let Satan cast out Satan. And hopefully we'll see this educational system decline to a point that we can bring in something new and something fair, so that all students that function within this educational system can receive equal education. We have not received that equal education today. So again, we run to the front of the line to get supplies, but we are not being supplied with the proper information, with the proper knowledge to advance our people above servitude. Even when we go to college, most of the time we go to college so that we can be of service to those outside of our community. It's hardly or very rare that we come back and build up our community like our ancestors did. And many of them did not have the education, the fine education that we have today. When we study the history of Black Wall Street, when we study the historical Greenwood District, not many of them had the fine educations that we have today, but they had more. Our community was built upon reliance on each other, not upon the education of our former slave masters. In fact, the former slave masters kept our people out of their world, kept us out of their community, so we had to rely on one another for our sustenance. But look at us today. We are highly educated according to this world's standards, yet we are become increasingly dependent upon those outside of our community. I said it many times, it's a shame that in a community that had over 30 grocery stores, we now live in a food desert. That does not make sense, particularly with the type of education that we claim to have today. We have countless individuals with business degrees, associate's degrees, yet there's no business in our community. What is wrong with us? Have we fallen asleep? Do we feel that we can't answer our own problems? We have the skills, we have the education, but we cannot solve our own problems. We have to rely on those outside of our community to feed us. This is not the example of Black Wall Street. We have to research and we have to look at what they did, and we have to duplicate that type of work. It doesn't take much. That's all we have to do, is have a desire to do that for ourselves, which we are relying on others to do for us. But we cannot do that if we don't have the proper education. This is the value of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He teaches us that we must learn to do something for ourselves. We don't have to go to Princeton University to learn how to feed ourselves. We don't have to go to Yale University to learn how to pull our resources. That's all we have to do, is do it. Learn to buy Black. Learn to support Black. Learn to build up Black. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us how we as a community tend to criticize Black. One-time criticism of Black business. We see something wrong and we turn away from it, but our white counterparts can do us wrong 1,000 times, and we'll continue to go back to them. But let one of us do us wrong one time, and we cutting off ties. We have to get beyond that type of mindset and realize that we are struggling. All of us are struggling to achieve success in a system that is working and stacked against us. So we have to not be so critical of one another. We're going to have to learn to work together so that we can revive our community and build up our community for our children and their children. With the increase of gentrification, in a few years, North Tulsa in particular, will start to look like Brookside. They're buying up property at a crazy rate. And at the prices that they're buying these properties up, houses that were selling for $30,000 a few years ago are now going for $190,000 today because of gentrification. They're moving in, and unfortunately, we are being moved out, because we don't have the proper education and unity that we need in order to sustain our community. So again, get out of the way of State Superintendent Walters and his fight against Gist. Neither one of them are doing anything for us. We've been on the bottom rung for far too long to be concerned about what they're saying about each other. Neither one of them have done any benefit for the Black student here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We remain, and I'll repeat it again, we remain at the bottom rung of education indicators. So why get upset over Walters and what he's saying against Gist? Why be compassionate with Gist? She of the two is the good cop. She's portraying the good cop, making us believe that she is for our community, but both of them uphold a system of white superiority and Black inferiority. And we have to come to realize that that's what we're dealing with today. We are dealing with a system that has been put in place a long time ago. And we are still dealing with that system. This is why almost 50 years after the Equal Educational Act, that we are still lacking in education. We're still behind 20 to 30 points in math and reading because this system of white superiority remains in place. So we don't need to get upset. We don't need to get angry. Step back and allow them to go to war with each other, because the war is all about which one of them can control our community and keep us down and maintain this system of white superiority the best. That's what it's all about. It's not about improving your children's position in education. It's not. So don't be deceived. It's all about who can best keep us in a position of servitude in this community and society of white superiority. So again, brothers and sisters, get out of the way. Let them do what they're going to do. We need to learn how to educate our own children anyway. We need to really get back to that which established a Booker T. Washington. They didn't overtook that school. You go off in that school today, it hardly looks black. That's why they call it Tulsa, Washington. They don't even want to call it Booker T anymore. They call it Tulsa, Washington, because they don't want any person with black skin to have influence over their children. Yet their children are constantly being pushed into that school, and our children are being pushed out. It's a shame that our children in the neighborhood of Booker T. Washington are not smart enough today to qualify to attend a historical black high school. We should be ashamed of ourselves for allowing our children to suffer this type of racial discrimination. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. It's time that we take charge of our community and begin to do that which built a historical black Wall Street, a Greenwood District. We need to start having our own schools again and stop relying on those outside of our community to educate our people. So thank you, brothers and sisters, for tuning in to this week's edition of the Trumpet on Greenwood, coming to you live from the Greenwood Beat. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, if you want to listen to good music, if you want to be informed about what's going on in our community, tune in to the Greenwood Beat. Look it up on your internet. It's an internet radio station, and it's full of good information. It's full of good music. It is a joy to listen to music that does not degrade the black woman, that does not make the black man a criminal, or criminalize the black man, as the local radio stations are doing, playing the same old music, demoralizing music over and over again, 3 and 4 times a day, programming our people to kill ourselves. That's what the music does. This is why we should watch. If you have already watched it, watch it again. The movie called They Cloned Tyrone. As I was talking to my son, he said, I told him, after you get past the laughter, watch the movie again and then take notes and then observe our community and see if they are not poisoning our community with the food, with the liquor, with the smoking, menthol cigarettes, and all these tools that this movie identified as weapons against our people. Watch the movie again and then see what is going on in our community, how they are putting this poison in our community and how it's affecting our development, not only of our children, but as a community as a whole. Watch the movie again and study. But the Greenwood Beat gives us a break from such demoralizing advertisement. Gives us good, clean music. So I encourage you, brothers and sisters, listen to the Greenwood Beat, this new and exciting black-owned, woman-owned radio station coming live to you from these historic buildings located in the Greenwood District. Tune in every day and get your mind used to good music. Again, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Trumpet on Greenwood. Stay out of the way and let Satan cast out Satan so we can come together as a community and put something in place that will better serve our children and our community. Assalamu alaikum. Again, thank you for tuning in.